Welcome to the first module in this mini course on community-engaged implementation science. Today we'll be talking about what implementation science actually is. Our goals for this module are to define implementation science, to give broad examples about when it's useful, and then to end with an example of an implementation science project currently ongoing at the University of Florida. So first, let's define implementation science. The National Cancer Institute defines it as the study of methods to promote adoption and integration of evidence-based practices, interventions, and policies into routine healthcare and public health settings, with the goal to improve the impact on population health. Dr. Curran has a slightly briefer definition and defines implementation science as the study of how to best do the thing. In this case, the practice is the thing, and effectiveness research has already established that it works in a real-world setting. So implementation research looks at how we can best support people and places to do the thing. And we achieve this using implementation strategies, aka the stuff we do to try and help people and places do the thing. Finally, implementation science evaluates implementation outcomes, which on a broad level are how much and how well people and places are doing the thing. Now that we have a high-level idea of what implementation science is, let's talk about why and when it's useful. The main reason implementation science is so important is that without it, it takes a very long time for evidence-based practices to come into widespread use. And so there are often decades between us knowing something works and people getting access to it. The commonly repeated timeline is that it takes about 15 to 20 years to get evidence into practice. Dr. Khan confirmed this with a recent study looking at 5 evidence-based practices in cancer control, including HPV testing, HPV vaccination, mammography, advising smoking cessation, and colon cancer screening. In her study, it took an average of just under 8 years for clinical guidelines to be updated to reflect the evidence, and then almost another 8 years for the interventions to reach 50% use, for a total average of 15 years from publication to implementation. Implementation science is key to addressing this delay. So again, when is it useful? Implementation science fits by trying to address that 15-year gap when a practice has strong evidence of effectiveness, but is not yet in widespread use. Let's go over 2 examples adopted from an article by Dr. Lane Fall on when a practice is ready for implementation. In example 1, there is evidence in both randomized controlled trials and in a real-world setting that lung cancer screening helps improve lung cancer-related outcomes. However, use is low, with only 6% of those eligible screened in 2022. In our second example, a new drug has promising results in phase 3 randomized control trials for treating non-small cell lung cancer. The drug has shown strong efficacy in these trials, but has not been studied outside the specific tightly controlled study setting it was tested in. Do you think either of these examples are a good fit for implementation science research? In Dr. Lane Fall's article, she highlights the cancer screening as a good candidate for implementation science because you have real-world effectiveness data and low use. On the other hand, while the drug is promising, more information on the outcomes in a more diverse setting without tightly controlled inclusion and exclusion criteria is needed first. This doesn't mean the innovation or practice can never be a medication. There have been many implementation studies around appropriate prescribing of antibiotics or pain medications. These just come after there's more robust evidence of the effectiveness in a typical clinical setting. Finally, let's talk about an implementation science project currently ongoing at the University of Florida. The UF Health Cancer Center is in the process of implementing a new mobile mammography unit. There is strong evidence that both mammograms and mobile mammography units in particular improve patient outcomes. The Office of Community Outreach and Engagement is working with community partners on every step of the implementation to ensure that this program can reach the most patients who are eligible for screening in this setting. To do that, they are looking at what some of the barriers and facilitators to use might be, like distance, language, distrust of the healthcare system, trouble navigating follow-up care, and when clinical partners may be too busy to prioritize promoting the project. They're working with community partners on different strategies, like helping train and educate stakeholders, identifying groups that could be early adopters and therefore could promote it to others in their community, They're working more broadly on promoting the bus to patients over mass media, on how to remind and engage clinicians, and how to adapt materials to different languages and cultures. This is the end of our first module on defining implementation science. Our next module will touch on participatory approaches, which are different ways you can involve community members and stakeholders throughout the research process.